Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoffrey Edwards, series host and moderator, as well as the president of the Futsal Association of Trinidad Tobago. Futsal868 Corner Talks is an online meetup series where global sporting professionals share their experiences and perspectives on the fastest growing indoor sport in the world, futsal. In recent episodes, we expanded to discuss topics of social issues and their relation to sport. Our main objectives is to sensitize and educate sports stakeholders on the sport of futsal and other pressing local and global issues. Gender. It represents a confounding social construction, with gender equality being a complex, multifaceted, and multi-leveled, layered phenomenon that needs society in all of its sectoral linkages, from the global to the local. Gender equality appears in human rights policies. Its opposite, gender inequality, is not merely an echo of political promises of rhetoric, the discourse of global social for development and sport for all, but a reality in many parts of the world, such as sub-Saharan Africa. IOC President Thomas Bach said, "I firmly believe that the sport is one of the most powerful platforms for promoting gender equality and empowering women and girls." In 2017, from a local context, the Trinidad Tobago Olympic Committee launched Female is Future campaign, which seeks to provide equal opportunity for women and girls and equal chances to succeed at all levels of sport. The project also seeks to encourage and empower increased participation of women and girls in sport and physical activity, not only as athletes, but also coaches, sports medicine, sports science providers, administrators, leaders, and sports leaders and sports media. Given this backdrop, this, our 15th episode of Futsal868 Corner Talks, will be address part one of the topic, gender equality and inclusion in sport. In this, our first leg, my team lineup includes Mr. Mark Mungal, Director of the Caribbean Sport and Development Agency. Good day, Mr. Mungal. Thank you very much for having us, for being a part of it. Ms. Sabrina Mohammed, Head of Interviews at Trinidad Tobago Youth Advocacy Network. Good afternoon, Samantha. And Ms. Marianne Cornejo, Project Leader at Red Bull MotoGP. Good day.
Hello.
Thank you very much, each one of you all, for being a part of this great discussion. And as I said before, I am just your moderator. This is your show. And I really want us to go straight into it, guys. As we discuss, it is important that we define the keywords, terminologies, and phrases which makes up this question. What is gender? And if I may take the opportunity at this moment in helping this discussion to put up a graphic which speaks to it without giving you all the definition per se. But gender is not sex. And we want our viewers to understand that from the jump. Gender is not sex. Gender have to deal with identity and expression of self, while sex is a binary approach dealing with reproductive organs. However, there's another term called gender equality. And I ask, as always, ladies first. Ladies, please, in your humble expression, can you define gender equality for us? Samantha, Sabrina, Marianne, you decide. Anyone of you first, ladies?
Okay. For me, gender equality would be that both, regardless of, actually, it would be maybe a removal of the focus on the gender that you have, and for an individual, regardless, to have the same opportunities as the next person.
And to you, Sabrina?
Okay, so I think that's a great question, because recently in this semester that closed for me at UE, I did a project on gender And for me, gender equality ties into gender identity, as in how you view yourself, whether you are heterosexual or part of the LGBTQIA community. And for me, that means allowing everyone, regardless of how you identify yourself, equal opportunity to better yourselves and to anything that is open to persons who identify as heterosexual. So it's a level playing field, in my opinion.
And to Mr. Mungal, last but not least, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what the ladies have shared. I think, for me, I think it's important. And when we talk about gender equality, we talk about rights. And so gender equality is about equal rights. And so equal rights, not just for women, but also for men, equal rights for girls and boys. And when we think about rights, I think about this broadly, giving them the opportunities, the same amount of visibility, the responsibilities, the empowerment in all spheres of this, well, of life. But we're talking about sports sector, and of course it also implies critically equal access to and equal distribution of resources between men and women, girls and boys. So for me, that's in a nutshell. When we talk about gender equality, we're talking about rights and equal rights for women and men, girls and boys.
So the second terminology and we want to define is inclusion. And it's interesting that Sabrina speaks to the LGBTQIA group of society. And we look at what is inclusion when it comes to society. And I really put the question back to you, Sabrina. How would you define inclusion?
So for me, I have been grown up to be holistically developed and have a huge teamwork spirit where we include everyone. So for me, it would not be leaving anybody behind. We are a team, a group, whatever you may like to call it. So everyone is involved. And the famous term, many hands make work light, despite however you identify. I think that we are all worthy and we have something that is worth contributing, whether it be to a discussion, to an organization. So as I said before, it's no man left behind.
Marianne, coming from a, a, a gigantic entity, sported entity such as Red Bull, how would you define inclusion?
I think I mean, if I take into consideration where I'm coming from, I think inclusion would mean to me being able to have safety and to not have any fear because of how you identify. And so I think the ultimate goal of inclusion is that we no longer have to make an effort in order for there to be a certain amount of female representation, or to have somebody in the team come from a different walk of life. But for me, inclusion would be a creation of a safe space for everybody to express themselves as they would like.
It's interesting that you mentioned safe space because Mr. Mungal, I would consider him safe space general. Mark, tell me, what would you define inclusion, noting what Marianne would have mentioned?
Again, agreeing with them. I mean, with Marianne and Sabrina, that inclusion, again, looking at it from a right piece, that it's a basic right of everybody, to be able to participate and so on, regardless of gender, but also other things too, race and disability and religious persuasions, etc. Oftentimes, when we talk about inclusion, we tend to refer to persons with disabilities and minorities and those marginalized populations. So, and so it's important that when we talk about inclusion, that we recognize all of those marginalized populations that are often left out, excluded. So yeah, it's the opposite of exclusion. And so easy for us to be included if we're part of the mainstream. When we are not part of that mainstream, we become excluded. So for us, inclusion means that everybody should be embraced and should have the opportunities for participation, etc., etc. Yeah.
There are two other concepts of that goes hand in hand with inclusion and equality when it comes to principles of sport. And Mark, I want to come back to you, whereby we could speak as regards to equity and fairness. And before you answer, I want our viewers to understand that these 4 principles, for which we have a diagram to show you all afterwards, is very important for us to frame the conversation as we carry on into our 45 to 60 minute long conversation. So, Mark, can you give us a little more as regards to the 2 other concepts of the principles as regard concerning equity and fairness in sport?
Yeah, and again, that is the misunderstanding of the terms are important for us to be clear when we're talking about equality and when we're talking about equity. And both of them have to do with fairness. Equality for me has to do essentially with giving everybody the exact same thing, the exact same opportunities, the exact same resources, etc. Whereas equity is more needs-based and involves that distribution of resources, that those accesses to opportunities based on the needs of the particular target. So sometimes a particular club or organization may have a greater need than another. A particular target population may have a greater need than another. And so rather than give them the equal amounts when one needs less than the other, let's distribute with equity, and that allows them to have what is needed for them to be able to benefit.
And I want to say thank you very much to each of my panelists for the description of each of the terminologies. And for the viewers' purpose, this is what it is in terms of the principles of sport that our esteemed guests have been speaking to from a diagram point of view. Inclusion, noting that the circle covers everyone. Equality doesn't necessarily that everyone is at the same level. And equity, what it needs to be able to have everybody at the same level. So that those are very important principles of sport in terms of what we are going to speak to later on. And my last question for this segment, ladies and gents, is how are these 4 principles important? Because we have been hearing for decades long equality, equity, fairness. It's something that is going on. I mean, I reached out to my FMA group, my FIFA Masters group, and Marianne threw up her hands within minutes of being a guest. And I know because of the topic, Sabrina, the same thing, being a youth advocacy member. With all this being said and being thrown around for years, how is this important for sports? How is this important for society, where sports mirrors? Please do share with us.
For myself, I think that there is now an awareness from a sports marketing perspective. And thinking just in cold hard cash, for example, from a sports marketing perspective, there is an awareness of the loss of opportunity and not inviting women to be a part of the experience, whether it's a game or the sport itself or management. And I think now there's I feel, which is a step in the right direction, I believe. There is a big push to have more female representation. But something that I see as a problem is that if women have been so excluded from the process, whether it was starting to play sports at 8 years old, because that's what boys do. In my family, for example, I was always put in art and cooking classes, and my brothers were sent to sports camps. So from the beginning, already at such a young age, you're already seeing so many barriers to entry. And then once those barriers that start small, they magnify over the years. So then it's harder to find people, whether it's a top performing athlete or somebody in management who is specializing in sport as a woman. And so I think these are great calls, but I think it'll take a lot of effort and mindfulness and time for inclusion, equality, fairness, and equity to really be where it needs to be. But I'm hopeful, and I think conversations like this, and that's why I threw my hands up, I think they can be very eye-opening, because even today, even though there's been a lot of progress, some people still don't see all of the areas of improvement.
Sabrina?
Okay, so I grew up in a very holistic household where my mom, she's a teacher, and she really emphasized the need for us as children to be academic as well as athletic, whether what sport it may be. So here in Trinidad, the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs used to host many vacation camps during the Easter and the July-August vacations. And for every year, my mother would sign us up to those camps to play volleyball, swimming, hockey, tennis, my brother and I. And it helped shape the person that I am today to want to get involved. And it is talks like these and many seminars and webinars that we have to create awareness of these four topics. However, there's a lot of awareness, but there is a certain amount of implementation. And for me, I think that it needs a lot more effort because everybody wants to spread awareness, everybody wants to be included and so on. But it's hard to implement certain things, especially in various categories. So it's great to be aware, but I think implementation needs to match that level of awareness for it to be on a level playing field and to meet the equality and equity levels.
You spoke about level playing field, and that's very interesting. And Mark, I want to bring you in on that as regards to the level playing field that sports and the concepts that we mentioned play. You have been a sport practitioner from a recreational and a professional standpoint for years. How important is this discourse and to sport?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think Sabrina made a really valid point there that, look, this is not a new agenda item, right? We've had women and even men championing this movement for equity and for equality in sport for over 100 years. And yeah, we have quite a way to go. But we also need to recognize that there's been progress. So we have had progress in some areas, both in terms of specific component areas within the gender area, but also in some geographical areas. So, for example, we've seen a significant increase in participation of women at Olympic Games. Remember, in the early games, the women weren't even allowed to participate. And gradually, we increased the number of women participating. And I think with as many as 45% of the female participants from last games in Rio were women. That's significant. It's not perfect, and we still do have more male sports at the Olympics. We've seen that progress. We've also seen more women serving in leadership positions. And again, even though this is still a male-dominated sector, I'm just saying that we had some progress, but still a long way to go. When we look at organizations like FIFA and the IOC, they are the ones that the dominant sport organizations in the world. And for the IOC, I think they have, from out of 144, only 33 female members in their IOC executive. And I think less than 20% of national governing bodies or affiliates of the IOC are women. So yeah, we've made some progress, and we have some great milestones to celebrate too. The last Commonwealth Games Federation elections, Louise Martin, she broke the proverbial glass ceiling. She became the first female president of the Commonwealth Games Federation. So we have had some progress. We've had progress even in earnings. So we have several competitions now where both the men and the women get the same prize money. Those are huge milestones. But even though we've been closing that gap, I think there's some areas that we still need to address more deliberately. And I go back to what Sabrina was saying. I think we need to move beyond the rhetoric of campaigns and advocacy to more institutionalized change, beyond just the policy document to the implementation of the policy. So yeah, I think that this has been a long journey for many. They've made some progress, but there's still a long way to go. And I think for us to move towards leveling that playing field, we need to move to more action and less of those campaign things that happen, and we do a walk or a march or something like that, which is all well and good. But is it leading to that institutionalized change, that long term, and reaching specific targets that we want? So yeah.
If I could add on that, Mark, and I fully agree. I think sometimes when we think of the necessary changes, we have this feeling that it's a huge change that needs to happen. But in my experience, so I work in the development program that Red Bull has for riders. So we're creating hopefully the next generation of MotoGP pilots, and they are 13 to 17 years old typically. When they come to the selection event where they make the team, they're 12 or 13 normally, and so they're very young, and already at that point, 97% are male. So it's this systematic. I want to say almost disinvitation of women into the world of motorsports happens so early. And as the marches, as these conversations happen, I think we can also see how much individual power we have in making that gradual change and supporting it by ourselves, our families, our children, from an early age, being very aware of this gender matter, and taking it upon ourselves and our own personal responsibility to become educated and informed, and to seek out the experiences and opinions of others. I think these small changes can do huge things. For example, within my own family, my sister and I are obviously very resentful of us being kind of barred from sports. And with her kids, whatever sport, for example, if they're going to go dirt bike riding or something, the sons, the sister has to be invited as well. If she chooses to go or not, it's a different question, but she has to be invited.
As we take our first water break, I'm a big football fan. I have with me my Liverpool trio of Firmino, Mane, and Salah, with me in that of Samantha, Mark, and Mariana, to be, as we speak, part one of gender equality and inclusion in sport. We're going to take a quick break, and we want our viewers to understand why sport empowers women and girls. You're watching Futsal 868 Corner Talks. We'll be right back. Water break is over. Welcome back to Futsal 868 Corner Talks. And that video just highlights why it's important to use sport to empower our women and girls, because we are speaking about gender equality in sports, and we just thought we'd be able to splice that in. To those who are just joining us on our Facebook page and YouTube channels, today we speak as regards to gender equality, and I have my fantastic trio, my forward lineup, who is going to score all the goals and bring this championship to Futsal 868. So in this segment, we are going into the meat and bones. We are going to the meats and potatoes of the discussion, and I'm going to go straight into it. Respect, resources, and recognition. How important is women in sport, from the athlete to the decision maker? How important? And I want to start with you, Marianne, because before the break, you mentioned GP and development of your riders. And you say that there are not much females, if any at all. You also spoke as regards to your personal journey in terms of your non-involvement in sport growing up. How important is women to sport and in sport?
I think how important is women to sport? I think, again, coming from a marketing perspective, the amount of impact economically, diversity wise, the lack of female being involved or welcomed into the sporting environments is a huge loss, and a loss that is unsubstantiated. Why wouldn't women be made to feel comfortable in a stadium or in a sport? And I think yes, it has to. It's something that is already in the works of being corrected, as Mark said. A lot of progress has been made. But for example, when you were speaking about the Olympics, Mark, yes, women now are 45%, but the times of the female events are often not prime. Even within something as simple as scheduling, it is given priority is given to the men. And in a sport like motorsports, it's one of the few, I think, where men and women can really compete head to head. But if women are not invited to participate as athletes, it's such a loss to the sport. Who knows what new riding style has not come around because there really hasn't been support for women to contribute to the sport. Who knows what motorsport could look like in the future once the playing field has been leveled, like Sabrina had said.
Sabrina, I do apologize. I just got a message that I keep renaming you. I'm not your godfather. I do apologize. I'm calling you Samantha, not Sabrina. I was scolded via WhatsApp, and so I sincerely apologize. If you want me to be your godfather, you'll have to talk to your parents offline with regards to that. But it's very interesting as regards to what Marianne is saying. And I just want to bring up a graphic that speaks to both Marianne's point and Mark's point that came from the IOC, where it's clearly shown that the Youth Olympic Games and the Winter Olympics, you had almost close to 50% participation. As a matter of fact, the Lausanne 2020 recorded that is the first time that there was equal participation for both men and women, boys and girls in sport. Being a youth advocacy group in Trinidad and Tobago, what do you want to see out of gender equality for girls and women in sport?
All right. So, Jeffrey, I just want to say that calling me Samantha is nothing new. There have been many people in my life who has just mistaken me like Samantha. So I probably have a Samantha face, who knows? But to answer your question, being a former student athlete, we face a lot of challenges, especially with balancing your academics and athletics. And the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee has a slogan that the future is female, right? So there's a lot of campaigns and awareness of that. Now, as Marianne said about the events being women not being in the prime time of these events and so on, I think it's important that we in youth advocacy networks empower females. Just recently in March, there was the International Women's Day where there was a rally at the Queen's Park Savannah, Port of Spain. So our organization represented, and for us, we want to see young girls and women continue to be empowered and inspired. I just want to have a theatrical background a little bit. So I just want to jump for a few seconds. Many times, persons who get into the acting industry say that growing up, they didn't see persons like themselves and they wanted to change that. So for the athletes that are representing Trinidad, for the advocates that are representing various organizations, I think that that it is necessary that we continue to empower ourselves, those around us, because this is Trinidad and people talk all the time. So the word will get around, the word will spread, and once action is taken, it becomes a lot easier because we can talk and speak and say yes and yes. But when it's time to get down into the nitty-gritties, to put in that hard work, to promote and so on, we have a lot of fallbacks. And women and girls were trained to become caring and nurturing as homemakers, as they would traditionally call it. And you can see it in the toys. They would give boys cars and they would give girls cooking sets and so on. So it's important that we as youth advocates, as I said, continue to empower ourselves and those around us. And eventually, this revolution, nobody will be able to stop us at all. So, yes.
Thank you very much for that, and I appreciate the fact that you let me off the hook, even though I was getting blasted on WhatsApp. Mark, when it is I asked you to be a guest, you literally, and I'm only saying Mark because of the show, but normally I call him Uncle Donnie. Yeah? So I hope I don't get a little slap afterwards, you know. So Mark, when I asked you to be a guest on the show, you wanted to show Trinidad and Tobago, the region and the world, a different side to the topic. Please go ahead and enlighten our viewers as regards to your perspective when it comes to this topic of gender equality and inclusion in sport.
Just before I go to that, I think to follow up on Marianne's point about the coverage of female events. Just in prepping for this conversation, one of the articles that I came across, a study, I think it was a European Council study, Council of Europe study, talked about, I think it's something like 90% of the journalists that cover sport are male. And as a result of that, and that shouldn't say anything, because if you're covering sport, you're covering sport. But as a result of that, or certainly linked to that, the bulk of the coverage of sport is about men and men's sport. So not surprising that even though, and these are the things that we have to address, but I'm suggesting that we need to address them more strategically. So we need to move away, I think, not that it's not important, but I think we need to move beyond just the campaigning and to be very strategic about what are the issues that we want to address. And so if one of the issues, for example, is around the media coverage, then we need to do something very deliberately about that. If 90% of the sports journalists are men, well, an immediate and obvious thing for us strategically to do is to invest in building the capacity of women as journalists. And to be honest, those of us who've been fortunate to have female journalists in some of the sports that we love to listen to, like, and for us here in the Caribbean, as painful as it is listening to the cricket, we have Ebony, one of the bright cricket commentators. It's just a joy to listen to her, you know, and her analysis and what she brings. And it's really, that for me she's an example of a really level playing field. She's not there just as a token. She brings that expertise, she brings her playing experience, and she brings her journalism expertise as well as a professional. Why don't we have more of those? Why don't we have more of with female journalists? What's the barrier for that? And that's where I think we need to be more strategic.
If I may come in quickly on that, yes, I know I'm moderator, but it's interesting that you mentioned, because last week episode we spoke as regards to sport journalism, and we had from Sportsmax, Maria Ramharak, who spoke exactly to your point. Yeah. And even last week we included this graphic, and this is from a lady who took on the Baseball Association in the United States of America, and won, opening up doors for women journalists that is happening right now in the United States of America. And it's very important, because what the landmark case was actually as regards to having the opportunity to go into the locker room and perform her duties as a reporter. And that is something very interesting, you know, to the extent of what we are speaking to. So continue, Mark. I just wanted to be able to stick that in there.
Yeah, all good. And I think, as I said, before we wrap, hopefully we'll talk a little bit about being more focused on really addressing this issue strategically versus emotionally.
Yes,
because it is an emotional issue as well, you know. And I have two daughters, young adults now, who also enjoyed participating in sport at an early age, and they've gone in different directions now. But you know, it was also on my mind as a father of young girls, and then my wife is also herself very active as a participant of recreational. Although sometimes I think it's certainly more more competitive than recreational, but that's her advice. But the issue that I wanted to bring to the table that's linked to the gender issue is the issue of abuse, and I know Sabrina is going to probably talk more about this, and the abuse that I'm referring to is more along the abuse of children, and a global effort that we've been involved in to safeguard and protect children in this sector, this sports sector. One of the things about our sector is that it's a very vulnerable sector. It's a very authentic sector. So when we are involved in sport, we literally drop our guard. It's the way, it's a strange way that we could be on a football field, even if we didn't know each other. In a short time, we would be slapping butts, giving high fives, hugging, and communicating in ways that are not the norm for other platforms. And so, because of that vulnerability, we put our children and other vulnerable communities at risk. And because there's this whole gender dynamic now, and remember, we're talking about gender here, this is really a power dynamic. So we have a male dominated sector and female participants. We create now an even more vulnerable context. And so, as we talk about addressing this issue of gender in sport, we can't ignore the issue of safeguarding and protection of our children. And so, my plea to Sabrina, yourself, and Marianne, and others who are involved in the gender agenda to also give consideration to that safeguarding and protection of girls and children in general, but girls and women in sport. And women are equally as vulnerable. And in fact, one of the most vulnerable groups are the adolescent athletes who are just at that cusp of making it at a professional level or top team level, because they are less likely to tell of abuse. So if they're being abused by someone in authority, because they don't want to miss out on that opportunity to go to an Olympic Games or to make this high school team or the professional team, they keep that secretly and endure the pain and the absolute horror of being abused by whoever that abuser is. And so it's important as we address this issue of gender that we keep in the back of our minds, in the front of our minds, that we also have a responsibility not only to provide opportunities for empowerment and for participation and for serving in leadership, but that we also ensure that those opportunities are safe. So what we don't want to do is to create more opportunities for girls and for women to participate in sport and at the same time put them at risk of harm. And so I thank you, Jeffrey, for giving me the opportunity to at least share this with the panelists and with those who are listening.
It's a pleasure, because as you speak, there was one course in Leicester, Mariana, that I took where we actually had to do a public relations, a crisis communication plan. And we actually dealt with the sex abuse scandals from the United States gymnastics team, Dr. Larry Nassar, where it is known that the Michigan State University had to pay out over $500 million settlement to more than 300 victims. You're talking about more than 300 victims. That put together with the fact in doing research for this conversation, very few, if any at all, in terms of the podcasts, the videos, YouTube videos that I listened to, I looked at, the team looked at, did not look at what it is you spoke about, Mark. And I was very much interested to hear that, which leads us straight into discrimination, which leads us straight into sexual harassment. And that is very important from the concept of gender equality. Mariana, I don't want to put you in a very awkward position, but can you speak to sexual discrimination and sexual harassment from gender equality in sport?
Yes, well, I think it's a chilling but super important point that Mark said, and like the case with Larry Nassar in USA Gymnastics. There's also the case of Jerry Sandusky and the University of Pennsylvania, where he was using exactly targeting boys from difficult family backgrounds who he knew he could manipulate and groom to not tell. And I think sports, in its essence, traveling for competitions, overnight stays, etc., it creates an environment that is ripe for abuse. And so it is very much the responsibility of the adults, myself included. My riders are 13 to 17, as I said, to create an environment in which they have access to adults that they can trust, and that they know that they can turn to them for something like this. I think in terms of my work experience now, it is completely male dominated. We are in the paddock, let's say, and it's, I don't know, 80% male, but it's very lucky. I have received so much support from my boss, who is also a man, in that there is a zero tolerance policy. If anybody is inappropriate towards us at any moment, we know that we can go to him, we can go to the security guard on site, we can make a fuss and even expel somebody from our hospitality, or take back their paddock pass, etc. There's consequences, and we don't need to deal with any of it. And there's also, I think, just in making, he makes a point to hire females and to give the opportunity to women, even though it is a male dominated industry. And I think that goes very far, and we feel very comfortable and confident in our roles and in the opportunity we have within the team.
I want to get back to you again and just stay with you for a little bit, even though I'll pull the screen here. But I want to stay with you for a little bit. As regards to the quota when it comes to women in leadership, do you believe that there should be a quota?
That's a complicated. So one of my colleagues, he's from South Africa, and we were talking about quotas in the sense of diversity quotas. I understand that I think in our core, none of us, or at least I'll just speak for myself, I don't want to be given a possibility or an opportunity that I don't deserve. Women have very high imposter syndrome, so even if we have so much experience and we've studied it and everything, it's something that we were socially groomed to have, perhaps. That, for example, you see it when men go for a position. If they meet 80% of the qualifications, they're like, I'm going to go for it. And for a woman, we want to meet 110% before we say, maybe I'd be. And I think that's something that I for sure missed out on in not having competition as a child. It was seen negatively for females to be competitive. I didn't grow up having a healthy sense of competition against others, and also with myself, of just wanting to improve, because I missed it in sport. I didn't get that very valuable lesson, along with teamwork and the other ones that the video that you showed covered. I think I deviated a bit from your question, but please.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's what it's about. Is our corner talk. So we flow in. Sabrina, back to you, and thank you very much for having the resilience to come with us, stay with us. Do you think that having more women leaders in sport is not enough on its own to bring about cultural change?
All right. So I just want to apologize for my technical difficulties, but I'm happy to be back.
Yeah.
All right. And I just want to stray a little bit before I speak about the topic. All right. So recently, Harvard Business School did a study, a 30-year study. So it recently ended, on women and men leaders and who were the more competent leaders in the workplaces. And it showed that they had 16 categories on which they compared them, and that women, no offense to men, exceptionally led these organizations and these teams to great results, breaking a number of glass ceilings. And the main reason was that women take care of their employees and so on, and men tend to take charge. So having women taking care of the persons that they are in charge of or involved with allowed them to feel whole again, allowed them to feel welcomed, you know. Right, so onto the sports segment now. I think that women leaders, having them as leaders are not enough because I believe that there are strength in numbers. So women alone can't rise. If we have men supporting us, organizations that are there with us, pushing us head and head, encouraging others to see that we are worthy and that we bring something valuable to the table, it's just going to blow up into a huge success, you know. But having the woman alone pushing themselves and pushing each other is not enough because we need support, you know. And men being put on the forefront for, oh wow, he's a star athlete, he's a star sport journalist. Having them support and endorse women gives us a stronger foundation for the various platforms that we will delve into whenever it may come.
Well, I mean, I will say this much. Being a prayers man and with some sprinkle of saints in me, we are gentlemen. We totally understand what it means to have, to have a woman be a part of us. Yes, Sir Donny, we totally understand. But before we even continue along that trend, I want to put this graphic up to highlight what you're saying. This comes from the IOC, whereby we see that in January 2019, 33% of AIOC members were female. And the reason why I want to stick with the IOC is because they are supposed to be the gold standard of sports management globally. And we are seeing that only 33% of the IOC members are. And this goes back to the point of that Mr. Brian Lewis, the TTOC president, has been saying for years. He wants the future to be female. Coming to you, Mark.
Yeah.
How important are men to this discussion of gender equality in sport?
Yeah. First of all, we have to defend the big stone that Sabrina threw at us there. So, yeah, and I mean, we can't challenge, or maybe we can challenge the Harvard study, but I think that we also need to be cautious that in this, and it's part of this conversation around gender equality and gender equity, that we don't address the issues of those who are disproportionately represented by throwing another population under the bus. So I think we need to also be careful about that. And I think men want to be a part of this solution too, and I certainly want to continue to be a part of the solution. So yeah, I hear you, and that probably is quite accurate in terms of what the studies show. I think that from what we project and what we present about equality, that it's as we shared earlier, this is not a woman's issue or any other issue. This is about everybody. It's an everybody issue. What was the question, man? Don't she threw at me there, so we had to.
Yeah. That kind of shift a little bit. But before we go to that question again, I just want to reiterate your point, Sabrina. Somebody sent me a message again, or sent us a message as regards to that. They said they love it. Women take care and men take charge. So the question is,
Jeffrey, there are some women in my life who take charge, and I do women
only for the right reasons. We take charge for the right reasons.
So the question was how important are men to the discussion and to the change when it comes to gender equality in sport?
Yeah, and that's a serious issue because in such a male-dominated sector, the sports sector that is kind of was created by men for men and that has excluded women for so many years. If we're not part of the solution, we will remain a part of the problem. And so when we talk about solutions, and one of the solutions that we'll talk about certainly is about education. Oftentimes when we're doing gender programs and we're investing in education, the target populations are the girls and the young women. I think we also need to include any projects that are speaking to the issue of addressing this disproportionate representation and opportunity for women and girls, that we need to also educate the young men and, of course, those who are in already holding office. So I think that absolutely men have to be part of this solution now, not in supporting, they have to be champions as well. And they have to use their spaces wherever they are, as Brian has been doing with the Olympic Committee, taking a strong position, articulating a strong position, and putting things in place to make that come to reality. So, yeah, and in the same way we said, so it's not good enough for us for those who sit in the hierarchy of sports to talk about this and to have the posters that share messages about it. They need to move to action. And I'm still not buying the IOC data stuff that you threw up there. I think it's easy for us to also spin data to make it look, that we're addressing the issue. And the truth is, we know it. We know it. Let's not put your head under the sand. You need to bring up the ostrich graphic there now, Jeffrey. Because the truth is, we know it. And those heavy-duty sport organizations, they have been and they continue to be dominated by men. And it's a culture that's so entrenched that it's difficult to get out of. And I think Sabrina may have mentioned the menial roles that we often assign to women, and it's the same thing. So what the Olympic Committee has done is put and those are not menial roles, but I'm just saying, and let me not use the Olympic Committee because I'll probably get blazed for that. But what some of the governing bodies are doing locally, and we've done for years, and across the board, even at school level, when you have the school sports bodies, the school football association or the school volleyball association, the role that we assigned to the women or we nominate them for are the secretarial roles. So the president and the vice president, the big boys, are always big boys. And but as long as you turn around, who's going to take notes? It's always the female representative. And so why aren't we taking on those? And so, yeah, so this is an investment that men have to play a really active part in. And it's an investment in several different dimensions of life, including strengthening the capacity of women as leaders as well. So, yeah.
I think if I could add to that, I think that the role of men is critical. In as Mark said, not just hands off, this is not my problem, but I support it, sure, but actively. I know when I have been in situations where there is clear sexism, whether it's a comment or something else, and the time it takes me to process it because there's also this fear that I have of being labeled as too emotional, or she can't take a joke, or I want to get along well with my team, and I want to succeed in my position. And so when a situation happens, in the time that I'm digesting and deciding how I'll react, when I have had male allies speak up for me, calling out the behavior themselves, to me, it's so impactful, it's so moving, and it's something that I appreciate each and every time, whether it's in a small way. It could be even in a form of a joke, like saying, haha, #MeToo, or, in any way, calling it out is 10,000 times better than silence. And so I think it's very important that men realize the effects that these small decisions can have on the overall work environment.
Yeah, just as we say in the safeguarding space, that safeguarding and protection of children is everybody's business. Similarly, gender equity, gender equality is everybody's business. It's not a woman's issue. It's everybody's business.
So, watching other programs, there has been a consensus as regards to the issues: portrayal through media, governance in terms of leadership roles and responsibilities, funding in terms of equal payments, and we know that through Wimbledon and the All England Tennis Association, HR monitoring and communication, sporting leagues. But what I would like to do with each one of you all, as we have this corner talks, is I want you all to choose one or two or three or all that is close to you all and speak freely based on your experiences, because we have a panel here that is local, international, and regional. And while you all think, I want to look at some comments from our audience, and this is coming from Mr. Constantine Constant. Good day, Connie, who is our men's national head coach, who is made a very extremely great point. The problem is a good old boy network. In Mr. Brian Lewis will say boys club. That's why you need affirmative action and quotas. Otherwise, minorities in the US will never have been given an opportunity. I believe that the best person should be given a position, but that's not the world we live in yet. Thank you very much, Connie, in terms of, for the rest of it. Pat Charles made a comment. What Mark says about educating that the male, sorry, is very important, since a lot of the perpetuation of the bias stems from the unconscious. Thank you very much, Pat Charles, watching us from the YouTube channel, for that input. Marianne Mohammed, her comment and input reads, women take care, men take charge. Very interesting and very true, and that's very much true. So coming back to the question, ladies and gents, based on what I would have mentioned as regards to portrayal, governance, funding, HR monitoring, and communication, as well as sporting league, I would like you all to free flow your thoughts on any one of those or all of it. And I will start with Marianne. And I know that it might be a little much, but I really want you all to speak from data-driven, yes, but also from the heart as regards to your experience with any one of those that from our research is a consensus of issues and problems when it comes to gender equality in sport.
Can you repeat the different buckets? It was governance?
Of course. Is portrayal, that's in terms of media influence, governance in that of, and I think we spoke to governance already in terms of leadership, rules and responsibilities, funding when we look at equal payment, HR monitoring and communications. And just to help you when it comes to, and help the whole panel when it comes to equal payment, we all know the whole story as regards to the US and the fact that over 4 World Cups, there have been a serious disparity in terms of equal payment. So, Marianne, the floor is yours.
Tough. I think it's difficult because my experience is more on the management side, and we have spoken about governance before, but something that I mentioned already earlier, to me that's very important for the future of sport, whether it's on the pitch, in the stadium, in the management offices, is this inclusion of women from the very, very beginning. I think by the time they're 20 years old or they're 15 years old, it's not that it's too late, but you've already lost so much ground in making women a part of sport from the get-go. And so it's something that I really, every year when we're selecting our new riders, it's something that we're always looking for. We're looking for that female who has had the time on the bike that maybe her brothers were given, but she wasn't invited from the beginning. And so it's very difficult then to recover that lost time. And I think if you include women in the beginning of sports, if they have this natural, I think very often we kind of inherit our sports from our families. So the riders will they tend to have fathers who were also riders. And so I think if we make more of an effort at the grassroots level, I think over time we can see that really impacting in every tier, whether it's performance or management.
Thank you very much for that, Marianne. Sabrina, you want to take a shot at it?
Yes, sure. So I'm a former student athlete, right? And when I was in secondary school, I threw javelin, I threw shot put, and I represented my school at the national level. I never won, but the fact that I represented my school meant a lot to me, because I would have had to go through zonal games to reach the national games. And you would see there's a women's category, right? That I think that goes without saying. But the representation from the districts, sometimes there would be more than others, even though they would have like a set amount of 2 per district or so on. Generally, when you check the representation of the games, it's maybe from Tobago, they would usually win. Props to Tobago, y'all are really good. But you will see like fewer from South and so on. So I think those are the areas that are focused on the sporting world in that area. Speaking about the media, when somebody wins a race or wins whatever it is they are winning, a lot of people rush to write stories on them. And I think that the famous saying that a lot of people see what's on the outside but not what goes on behind closed doors or what goes on the inside. And I think that I would like to see more sport journalists write about the process instead of just writing a victory story at the end. Just to highlight, yes, athletes do go through struggles, but I think that will aid in the empowerment of our athletes, not just for women, but also for men and young boys. So put a little bit more effort and work into the process rather than the final product, because everything does not end all glamorous. And I think the glamorous part is the process when you're going to have bad days, and that's okay. The important thing is, as long as you give your best and you leave that out there, you've already won. And I have just want to add one more point. I have been very fortunate to have a coach in my sporting club who was who took care of us per se. How are you going today? How is your homework? How are you getting through? That sort of thing. So she took care of us and had a very well-natured manner to all her athletes, whether it be male or female. So that is my 2 cents on that.
Mark, I have one more question to you before we do a quick break to come to your last segment. And that is, what is the role of the family and society to this topic, but more so from the family side of things?
That's an interesting one. And taking into consideration, I guess, that we have different types of family structures all over the world. I mean, we have kind of still the traditional family setting here in Trinidad, but even with that traditional family, we have single parent homes and then children who live with great aunts and so on. So, I mean, obviously the home, like every other setting, needs to be a safe space for children and young people growing up. I think there's some research that suggests that children whose parents, and particularly whose mothers, so connecting this to the gender, whose mothers are physically active, involved in physical activity and sport, are more likely to have children who participate in regular physical activity and sports through the lifespan. And that doesn't happen automatically. So I think, obviously the family, from a personal perspective, if I have to use more personal experience on this, I was lucky to grow up in a family. My dad in particular was actively involved in sport as a national coach and a national governing body president, and we grew up with every single sport and implement around the house. And our stadium was the road. We played cricket and football and basketball on the street. That was our stadium, as part of not just the family, but our neighborhood, the community. So I think all of those institutions, family has a role to play, neighborhoods and communities have a role to play, schools have a role to play. Wherever the people are, those institutions have a role to play, and that role has to be an enabling role and a facilitating role. As long as we provide those equitable opportunities, those equal opportunities for boys and our girl children, whether it's in the home, in the community, or in the schools, or in the clubs, or wherever they are, as long as we continue to provide that enabling and facilitating environment for them to participate, then we are doing our duty as adults to providing equal opportunity for them.
After this break, we take a look at suggestions and recommendations as we enter into extra time. You are looking at Futsal868 Corner Talks with my Liverpool trio. They are doing extremely well. I want to say thank you very much to my guests, Mark Mungal, Sabrina Mohammed, and Marianne Cornejo. So we'll be right back with this quick look.
I was in a very male-dominated sport before in cricket. And again, it's refreshing because actually when you go in there, it's not what everyone outside thinks. And certainly we've both had the experience at the FA that there are no barriers, there are no fences, there's nothing. We're just people, and we do our job well. But I understand that there is a challenge out there, and some women do need more confidence in believing themselves. Football can do that for you. But actually just believe in the fact that you can do a job and you can do it well.
My first steps in sport was in 2002, and actually produced the World Cup, and that was quite an experience. I was quite young at the time, and then people said, well, we have a woman running the show here and a public broadcaster. But lots has changed since then, and I always try to look at, mentors and make sure that you have a good network in place and grow it from there. And I think there is a good future for women in the business.
There's some really great, there's some really strong communities within women in sport that you can kind of lean on and work with. But I think the other thing is as well is don't just lean on women. I think I mentioned it earlier. We've both got a really great, strong male ally boss who absolutely supports us. But I don't think it's a gender thing. It's, to your point, it's just, it's are you doing a good job? How are you kind of performing? So I appreciate that's not the same experience for everyone. So there are kind of, there is support there within the industry. But I think it's I mentioned earlier I had quite a big industry change from technology to sports a couple of years ago, and I think it is that thing of just having the confidence in yourself, belief in yourself, and just going for it.
Please welcome Cynthia Marshall as the new interim CEO of the Dallas Mavericks.
So yes, we are in extra time, and I hope that video during the break really stimulated you and added value to what we have been speaking to. If you're joining us, you can catch us on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page as we Futsal868 keywords for the highlights of seeing these great guests speak and do their due. Welcome back to Futsal868 Corner Talks. I'm your host, Geoffrey Edwards, President of the Futsal Association of Trinidad Tobago, where today we speak gender equality and inclusion in sport. In this segment, I'm a little bit sad because it's the last segment, but we want to speak about recommendations. And it's very important that I ask my guests, because as always, we want to be solution-oriented. So I'm going to start off with Sabrina. And if you had the opportunity, Sabrina, to speak to the Minister of Sport, to speak to Mr. Brian Lewis, President of the TTOC, have a local conference to speak to all NGBs and NSOs as to the suggestions to this topic, what would you say to them?
All right. So, funnily enough, I met the Minister of Sports recently in January at a conference that I volunteered at, but we did not have the chance to speak about this, But I will tell them great job thus far, because we have to give thanks for effort that has been given so far, However, one of my suggestions would be to get in these communities. So yes, you have the zonal games. Yes, you have secondary school games, and you have CRIFTA and so on. But our athletes need support, not just a coach, but somebody maybe emotionally to help them, because there are things that sometimes bother athletes that they feel as though there's nobody that they can talk to, So having teams, support teams within the ministry to help holistically develop, and I keep saying holistically develop because I think that as individuals, it is important that we strive towards holistic development. And so having that team of people who would be able to get to know these athletes or be able to help teachers or whoever implement these things to make them feel a sense of belonging, and not that they have to play this sport or have to do well or have to come first or have to medal on the podium and so on, but to make them feel that you are accomplishing something, you are welcomed, you are loved, because more than anything, coaches and other persons are also advocates for these sports without even recognizing it. So yes, that is my 2 cents for this.
Donny, Mr. Mungal?
Yeah, I think I kind of go back a little bit because I think one of the things that we do need to think about, and Marianne spoke about it. Well, you asked the question about quota systems. I think that if we're addressing on overarching, we must build into everything that we are doing those what we refer to as equal treatment type policies and programs. So where we are ensuring that if we're offering a youth program in a community, Ministry of Sport or sport company or the Olympic Committee, if we're offering programs, that they should always be equal. There should always be equal treatment so that we have opportunities for girls and boys, young men, young women, not just to participate, but also to be empowered to lead, etc. But if we have a situation where women and girls are disproportionately represented or have less opportunities, etc., then the recommendation is that we have to do that counterbalance. So we have to take that positive action, that kind of affirmative action, if you wish to use the US language. So that in the case of journalism, for example, if the data is telling us that 90% of our sports journalists are men, if we are going to do an intervention that's specifically to address that inequity, then we provide a sport journalism education program. And I can say that through Citizen Sports Foundation, this is something that we have on the drawing board. But now let's only target, or let's say 90% of the participants, we are allowed 90% or 80% of the spots are for girls or women. That's kind of to counterbalance. So that might seem to be unequal, but that's what equity is, to be taking a positive action or to counterbalance the inequality. And so and I'm saying that in the context of sport journalism, but for all of these areas that we talked about, we need to be strategic and informed by the data. And for whichever ones that we agree on, whatever we say that we want to do, make sure we have clear outcomes and link those outcomes to a theory of change model so that we know where we want to go and how we're going to get there, setting targets, etc. Whether it's greater access to facilities, increased resource allocation, more women serving in leadership, etc., and set targets. So we know that by 2025, 100,000 girls across Trinidad have access to quality coaching programs. By 2025, at least 50% of our national governing body presidents are women, etc. And then also include in that a proper monitoring and evaluation framework. Because if we're not measuring it, at the bottom level, well, not only won't we know if it's happening, but we're unlikely to actually do it. So that would be my recommendation to the minister or to Brian, the hierarchy.
Marianne?
You're muted.
Thank you. My recommendation, and it was kind of along the vein of what Mark was saying. I would recommend that they use their resources. So there's already women in positions in the sport, etc. I think it would be very valuable to use them as a first point and to really get an understanding. I think it's so important that we all are as informed as we can be about this issue. As has been said previously, it's not a women's issue, it's everyone's issue. And so I think all of us have a role to play within it. And it's important that we ask questions. And as we saw, going back to what was mentioned about Larry Nassar, there were in the court trial, there were so many instances of people who had reported something or even a major thing that they witnessed, and it landed on deaf ears. So even though they saw something and said something, they maybe say something until something gets done about it. So be proactive and use your voice, use your platform, however small or big it may be. And I think that would be what I would want to say.
If I may, given the fact that you all have done a great job in terms of recommendations, I'm going to put up on the screen 6 points that came out of the IOC Gender Equality Review Project that was endorsed by the IOC Executive Board in February of 2018. to be able to assist our viewers as regards to and add value to what it is you all have been saying. And the point one is the leader and the leadership of gender equality, allocating funds specifically for sportswomen and employing funding as an incentive for organizations to implement gender equality, sustain or in some cases introduce an inclusive organizational culture. Point four, ensure that women who are involved in senior governance positions are assigned roles of influence with decision-making responsibilities, use statutes, policies, and electoral process to entrench gender equality in the organization. Last, monitor progress, measure and evaluate outcomes, and instill accountability. With that being said, I would like to have your closing comments from each one of you. Noting, I want to say thank you very much for being here. So closing comments, starting with as always, ladies first. Sabrina.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you to Jeffrey for inviting me on this platform and to share my knowledge and to gain a lot of knowledge from Marianne and Mark and yourself. You know, I'm young, I'm still 19, still learning a lot of things, and this has been one of the things that I have been really excited about. If you check my social media, it has been marketing for this event, as I would call it. And to athletes out there, to advocates out there, you are not alone. There will be challenging times, but be sure that your work will be rewarded, your hard work will pay off, and that there's always somebody watching. All right, and great things are ahead for you. I promise you. Keep on doing the right things and encouraging yourself and those around you. Progress is forward. Progress is progress. Forward ever, backward never. Keep it up. Jeffrey?
Have we lost Jeffrey there? Wow. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, well, maybe in his absence, maybe just to share. Oh, Marianne, do you want to go?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's been wonderful. Actually, it's been better since Jeffrey left. So having a conversation. Oh, he's coming back. Okay, I didn't say anything.
As always, you know how technology runs.
I making jokes about you. You're lucky you got back in.
I mean, I just was hoping that, you know, Oli was still there while I was gone, you know, and that Oli wasn't bad talking when he go back around. But anyhow, Sabrina, continue, darling.
All right, so I closed off, but I just wanted to say again that to the young advocates and athletes, keep doing what you're doing. Progress is progress, and your hard work will never go in vain. All right?
So, Marianne, thank you very much for taking the time. What time is it by you in Austria at the moment?
It is 11:15 p.m.
Right, and we at this point in time, we Trinbagonians welcome you when the opportunity arrives to this beautiful island of Trinidad and Tobago.
I've actually been before. I would absolutely love to go again.
Definitely, that's what we're talking about. You know, that's what we're talking about. So, give us your closing remarks.
For me, I think like Sabrina, I'm very thankful to have been a part of this conversation. It has been so illuminating to hear Mark and Sabrina's experience in it, and I know with advocates like this in the cause that great things can be done. My closing statement would be perhaps to young women, girls who are considering sports as either a profession or pursuing it as a hobby or as a profession, whether it's in management or on the sports side, performance. Find a mentor. It made such a difference for me to find someone that I could reach out to and ask questions about different situations. I reached out to somebody that I had only kind of met in passing, because when I saw a woman who was in sports for so long, to me she was like spotting a unicorn, and having her guidance throughout my career has been a massive help. So I offer myself if anybody has any questions ever, but also, you know, there's people around you who want to support you and help, and if you find a mentor, I think that it can be really beneficial to not just you individually but to sport in general. So keep at it, and best of luck.
Thank you very much, Marianne. And I would like you to answer a question for me via video that we could share on our social media platform thereafter, where someone asks a question: how does athletic sponsorship play a role in gender equality? So I put that challenge out to you in terms of sending us a video that we can be able to answer that, given the time frame that we have, the limited time frame that we have. On to Mark, Mr. Mungal.
Jeffrey, thanks a lot for inviting me to be part of this conversation alongside Sabrina and Marianne. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I mean, for me also a continuous learning experience. I think, yeah, we joked around a little bit, but this is really a serious issue, gender equity, the reality of what's happening globally, and of course in our little rock here in the Caribbean. It's a serious issue. One of the issues that we did not address that's impacting from a gender perspective is health. And so from early age, from primary school, children, primary school age girls are participating in less sport and physical activity than the boys. And the participation levels continue to decrease as they hit secondary school and then beyond, to the extent that, and I'm not sure about the age group, I think this would be 25 to 65-year-olds. We have some 75% or thereabouts of our female population who are not meeting the daily requirement of that daily physical activity requirement, which is impacting on their health as one of those risk factors leading to non-communicable diseases. And so this issue of gender equity has many different implications, and one of them is a serious implication about the health of our women. And so it's something that we need to take seriously, and I really admire your efforts, Jeffrey. But again, we need to move beyond this talking and sharing of knowledge, which is important, towards that, to more policy, and then beyond the policy to practice. And I close with that point that I shared earlier, that this issue of gender equity in sport and gender equity in general is not just an issue for women, it's everybody's business.
And with that being said, gender equality or gender inequality, depending on which side of the coin or which perspective you want to view it, is a complex, multifaceted, and a multi-layered, multi-level phenomenon that needs society in all of its sectoral linkages, from the global to the local, for which this show has clearly exhibited. We would like to say thank you to our panel, Ms. Sabrina Mohammed, Ms. Marianne Cornejo, and Mr. Mark Mungal for the insightful perspective on this powerful topic. Just to let you all know that part 2, the athlete's perspective, will feature a former international, or I should say pro cyclist, a West Indies women's cricketer, and a former national women's football captain, which will be held on the first Sunday in September. That will be part 2. So we want to say thank you very much to our panelists, and please be reminded that you can get a recap of our show on our Futsal868 Facebook page and YouTube channels. And to all, a great evening and a wonderful week ahead. To Marianne, do have a great rest, darling. And it has been a pleasure being your host once again. So you have been watching Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoffrey Edwards, President of the Futsal Association of Trinidad Tobago. Thank you very much.